Welcome to West Indies on 99.94, the home of cricket audio. I'm your co-host, Mashal St. Patrick here from the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And with me as ever is my co-host, Santoki Nagulendran, also from the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. We're your home for West Indies cricket content, and we'll be right here several times every week discussing them. You can find us in your favorite podcast places on YouTube or in our 99.94 app. Thanks for joining Cricket's conversation. Today, we're talking about the Guyana Amazon Warriors. Santoki, take it away.
Yeah, this should be a good one, Mashal. We're at the halfway point of the 2022 Caribbean Premier League, and we're here to look at the franchise which, they're an unusual one, Guyana Amazon Warriors. We haven't won. I say we, for those that don't know, I'm Guyanese. So this is partly talking as a fan, partly talking as an analyst. But Guyana Amazon Warriors haven't won a title yet in CPL, but they're always considered a big team. You'd always expect them to get into the playoffs and the final stages. And they've had different sort of formulas and tactics, but have just been unable to cross that final hurdle. Now, the 2022 CPL so far has been a mixed bag for them. They've won one game and lost two and had one rained off. And there's a lot of talking points within this franchise. But I guess, Mashal, there's only one place we can start, which is Romario Shepherd and death bowling. Now, for those of you that may have missed Guyana Amazon Warriors games this season, Romario Shepherd, he bowls at the death for West Indies and the Guyana Amazon Warriors. In the match against Jamaica Talawars, in the 18th over, he gave away 23 runs. Undeterred, Captain Shimron Hetmeyer then put him in at the death for the final over against St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots, where he went for 22 runs and fumbled again, costing the franchise 2 matches. Now, in the last game, interestingly enough, against St. Lucia Kings, they decided to go for Chemo Paul at the death, and they ended up winning. So, Mashal, do you think we've come to a point where we need to talk about, is Romario Shepherd just not suited to bowl at the death? Does he not have the skill set or temperament to be a death bowler?
It's a very good question, Santoki. And to be honest, there's no simple answer for this. I think it's it requires a multifaceted response. And I'm going to try break it down and see where we kind of land with this on West Indies on 99.94. I think first things first, it's important to be honest and remember that when Romario Shepherd first broke into the West Indies team, it was off the back of strong performances with Guyana. And I mean, that's across first class, list day, T20. And if we go back to that iteration of Romario Shepherd, this was a guy who stood out in the Caribbean due to his propensity to be able to hit Yorkers and his ability to actually bowl at the death. Actually, funnily enough, his ability to bowl at the death, hit kind of in-swinging Yorkers, and he had a few variations up his sleeve. That was his strength. Now, what I would say, Santoki, and where I think we should probably go with this first things first is a lot of where Romario Shepherd's game is at right now can be summed up by the big bag that he got in the IPL. Because, and this isn't a slander episode on Romario Shepherd, that's not the point, because this is about looking at the Amazon Warriors as a whole, but this is just one talking point. When he got that big bag in the IPL, Santoki, I remember yourself and myself saying, how did he get that? And that wasn't to say he wasn't a good player, but we couldn't identify what the skill set was the Sunrisers had purchased. Were they purchasing a lower order slugger? Were they purchasing an all-rounder? Were they purchasing somebody who they thought could bowl 4 overs? In the end, Santoki played 2 games across the whole tournament and essentially got a big bag for nothing. Now, in that time, his stock as a bowler has declined rapidly within the region. If we go back to Super 50 2021, you remember the infamous, was it against TKR? Was it against TKR? Yeah. Sorry, not even TKR. Sorry, they're not called that in Super
Trinidad.
It's Trinidad, where his 10 overs went for like 105 runs. or something like that. And or maybe that's actually the correct signpost, Santoki, because since that moment in time, it's become more and more baffling how he's become a guaranteed select in the West Indies team. And now we fast forward through to CPL 2022. you would have thought that by this additional CPL that it'd already been established that if you're going to bowl him, get his overs out the way early. Don't bowl him in the death, because the performances for the West Indies have shown that's not the time. If you are going to bowl him, that's not the time to bowl him. So I guess, having said all that, I need to put it back to you, Santoki. Rather than look at Romario Shepherd and say what's gone wrong with him, there's also a part of it where you have to say, but why was Hetmeyer bowling him at the death? Like, surely the think tank, the Guyana think tank, that includes Hetmeyer, that includes the coaches, have looked at his body of work over the last year, and you and I could have identified you shouldn't bowl him at the death. So why couldn't they identify that? And even worse, having seen it fail once, why go back to it?
Yeah,
Why
no,
go back to
100%.
it a second time?
I think Shimron Hetmeyer did say in the post-match interview after the second match where Romario Shepherd went for big runs again that he takes all the blame. It was him that sort of insisted Shepherd bowl. So I guess we can't entirely blame Shepherd for this. It seems like he doesn't stick his hand out and say, I definitely want to bowl the death overs. I'm feeling confident. It feels like they've trusted him for the role, and there's just that failure to sort of adapt. It's like plan A is Romario Shepherd bowls at the death, and we stick to it. Obviously, because of the extreme circumstances of his last two performances at the death, they've gone to Chemo Paul almost out of desperation, just anyone else who can sort of bowl at the death. But it'd be interesting to see going forward where Hetmeyer does see Shepherd. Is it just a case, as you said, let's try and get him to bowl his 3-4 overs out of the way very quickly in the middle overs and do almost sort of damage limitation? And I think, as you said, the IPL deal was interesting. He got a lot of money. It was $1 million for his services in the IPL. But I also think Shepherd's issue is if you're bowling at the death, you need to be able to adapt and innovate and kind of move on year with your technique. Because once you get to the IPL, you're going to have scouts and more information available for you. So before IPL, he'd sort of been a bowler who was known in the region, but hadn't played in big franchise leagues. Once you're in the IPL, you've got a different level of data analysts, statisticians to kind of work out your game. And it seems like, obviously, his strength has been his Yorker, but it seems like batsmen have worked out across franchises how to sort of play him. And this has affected his confidence. We've seen him bowl slow, wider, and he's sort of, as we said, he takes licks in the final over now. So it'd be interesting to see how he can recover. I think Sunil Narayan's a good example of how a player can sort of adapt over time and innovate to kind of stay ahead of the game. Shepherd needs to learn how to do that. And I think it's also interesting, Guyana Amazon Warriors traditionally have always signed an overseas pacer, whereas this year they haven't, which is kind of backing their faith in Romario Shepherd and Odean Smith to sort of perform. But it's interesting they haven't gone with Odean Smith at the death. Do you think they value Shepherd's skill set at the death higher than Odean Smith at the moment? Would you put Odean in now, bearing in mind Shepherd seems to have fallen away?
So I actually think this is a recruitment issue. And I remember when we did our episode on Caribbean Cricket Podcast, when young Samuel Badri came through to do the CPL preview show, I remember that when we spoke about the Guyana, because I went and watched it back the other day, and when we spoke about the Guyana squad, I raised one issue that I had with it. I said, I don't think they've got a strong pace attack. And I said at the time, okay, when they get to Guyana, which is the last leg of CPL, yes, having Shamsi, Tahir, Multi, etc., will probably pay off. But now they're in that situation where by the time they do get to Guyana, they might be scrambling to have to try and get points and not be able, like there won't be much leeway to fail, so to speak, when they get to the Guyana leg. And my worry with their squad makeup was, and this is with the greatest respect to them, Santoki. So this is, in a way, this is me answering your question about Odean Smith. If you gave me an 11 and I'm looking at that 11, I'm saying, right, who's my enforcer? Who's my quick enforcer? Who's the enforcer? And let's use Alzari Joseph for St. Lucia Kings, who's currently the tournament's top wicket taker. Alzari Joseph comes on to be the enforcer and take wickets, yeah? With the greatest respects to Chemo Paul, Romario Shepherd, and Odean Smith, none of them or none of their games are at a point where you could trust them like that. I think the only that in any given game, I reckon you're thinking maybe one of them might come off, but you could never go into a game with those three and say, yeah, that's our pace attack. they're going to make things happen, because I think you have to assume that at least one's going to bowl badly, possibly two of them, and in some days it might be all three. And I just wonder about that squad construction, if they made a cardinal error in not going for an established quick bowler, who you can go to at any point of the innings. So, for example, Barbados Royals have Obed McCoy. They can bowl him in the power play. They can bowl him out the power play. They can bowl him in the middle. They can bowl him in the death. Alzari Joseph can bowl at all phases of the innings as well. I'm using these as an example. Even the Talawars, the Talawars would argue they can bowl Miguel Pretorius at all stages of the innings. I just don't know if, from a pace perspective, Guyana have got the pacer to do that, which then puts them in this predicament. Santokin, I'll throw it back to you now, which then puts them in this predicament. Guyana historically in CPL have always been a better team in terms of bowling, with regards to spin bowling. And there's been times in this first half of the tournament where I felt, boy, they might as well just bowl 16 overs of spin and then just find 4 overs from the remaining 3 pacers. Or do you think that is too drastic to think like that?
Yeah, no, you raised an interesting topic. I think for me, it's astounding that you've got a top level franchise who haven't got a specialist fast bowler. Essentially, the 3 you named, Kemo, Paul, Shepherd, Odie, and Smith, are essentially bits and pieces all-rounders. You can expect them to bowl maybe 2 overs, perhaps bat for the final 2-3 overs and score big runs, but you wouldn't bank on them to bowl 4 overs each and essentially enforce the match, as you said. So for me, it's interesting that Guyana have opted to go down this route, and they've obviously invested a lot of money in their 2 overseas spinners, Shamsi and Tahir, who are world-class bowlers, but as you said, it sort of limits them, because in Guyana, they'll obviously prosper. They'll do a good job for you. They can maintain an economy rate. But I just think you need that sort of killer fast bowler who can kind of define an innings by taking wickets, like an Obed McCoy or an Alzari Joseph, just to come in and ramp up the pace. So at this point, yeah, it wouldn't be so. At the moment, we've got Moti, Tahir, and Shamsi as the 3 spinners who will bowl 4 overs each. So that's 12 overs. So it wouldn't be far-fetched to say, why don't they just bowl out Hemraj then for another 4 overs? Maybe get Paul Sterling and bowl 16, 17 overs, because if Shepherd and Odie and Smith are giving away runs, there's no tangible benefit to just slotting them in the side other than being forced to, because you've got them as all-rounders. So for me, they've obviously stuck to that policy of being spin kings, the spin dynasty. But my thing is, it hasn't got us across the line in any previous edition. So it's like you're sticking to a formula which hasn't been successful in the past. So it'd be interesting to see why the think tank went for this. And but one way they have improved, or have tried to improve, is in terms of the openers mash. So in the past few years, they've gone with Brandon King and Chandrabal Hemraj. Now, those two were an interesting combination because neither were an established T20 opener, and they were sort of thrown together. They worked excellently in the 2019 season when Guyana Amazon Warriors won 11 straight games in a row. Brandon King particularly making the West Indies after that. Obviously, Brandon King's form dipped. He's gone to the Jamaica Talawars, and Hemraj just stayed. And they've got in Paul Sterling now as an experienced overseas batsman. Unfortunately, for the first 3 games, Paul Sterling hasn't really lived up to his form and reputation, and he struggled. And in the last game, they opened with Shai Hope with Hemraj. Now, for me, in the modern day, or just generally in franchise cricket, if you're opening with Hemraj and Shai Hope, it's not an ingredient for success. We've seen Shai Hope struggle to get past the 80, 90 strike rate at the moment. Hemraj has been inconsistent, and that has sort of set the tone for their batting performances, which have been slightly lackluster and relied on Captain Hetmeyer to sort of save the innings by hitting that 200 strike rate to try and salvage something. So there's a lot to digest there. But I guess, Mash, let's talk about Shai Hope. In the modern T20 game, bearing in mind he's not even wicket keeping for Guyana, they've gone with Henrik Larsson as their wicket keeper, so he's a specialist batsman. As a specialist batsman, where do you see Shai Hope fitting, if at all, anywhere in the T20 side?
I think I'm going to keep this one simple. If he's not wicket keeping, I'm not sure how he makes the side. And I think he's making this Guyana side by default, because actually, if you look at the rest of the squad, the bat in depth isn't there. So what you got, like Matthew Nandu, and you got Jermaine Blackwood. Now, at this point, and again, it's a question for you to consider as an Amazon Warriors fan, Sandoki, is it worth dropping someone like a Hope and just saying to Jermaine Blackwood, you come have a go? Because I don't know, my view is just Shai Hope in T20 for me is a wicket keeper first, and then everything else is a bonus. But like I say, if they're not gonna put him behind the stumps, and he's not gonna hit his runs at a good lick, like his role definition, Santoki. Let's go back to that again. His role definition. What is his role? I couldn't tell you what his role is in that Guyana side. Is it to bat through as an anchor because he's failing? He's failing if that's his role. Is it to get off to a flyer? He's failing if that's his role. So I couldn't tell you what Guyana have instructed him to do. And all of this adds up to, having already spoken about Shepherd and the bowlers, or the lack of fast bowlers, all of this adds up to why the Warriors have been inconsistent. Because again, it's not clear through the 11 that tends to get picked match to match what the tactics are. And again, I hope I'm not being simplistic. I'll be eager to see what Amazon Warriors fans say. But to me, it's not clear what the tactics of the team are beyond we're going to bowl probably 12 good overs of spin more often than not, and the Hetmeyer's going to score runs quickly. Other than that, it's hard to really tell what the obvious tactics are. Obviously, there's good players there. So you mentioned Paul Sterling, hasn't worked out yet. There's Shepherd and Oldene Smith with the bat. Even Henrik Klassen did well the last game they played, in fairness, but it just feels like too many players. It just feels like they're carrying too many players at this specific moment in time. But the beauty of CPL is usually with CPL, the team you can scrape into fourth place with very minimal wins, generally speaking, in CPL. So all is not lost for the Warriors. But yeah, that's my kind of take on Hope. Santoki. I don't think he's got a place in this side, but it's whether you would want Blackwood in there instead of him.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think it's almost as if the Warriors are sort of, there's no long-term sort of vision. They're sort of just going on a game-by-game basis. Who can we sort of throw together and kind of go from there? And obviously, they're missing out. I think when we done our interview on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast about a year or two ago with Brandon King, he referenced Shoaib Malik being a key stalwart for the side. So they've lost Malik, Hafiz, and sort of trying to replace that experience has been hard for them in that middle order as well. I think Shai Hope has probably been brought in to do a Shoaib Malik role, score at 120 strike rate and keep the innings ticking along, but he's really struggled. I think if you're in the top 5 of a T20 side and you're consistently scoring under 100 strike rate, I don't think you deserve to be in the side. And it'd be interesting because there have been a lot of fans in the region who've called for Jermaine Blackwood to play in more T20s. Obviously, he comes across as an attacking batsman in the red ball format. So for me, and the fact he can bowl a bit of spin as well, if really needed, I think it's sooner rather than later we'll see Blackwood come in for Hope as a like for like replacement. But Mash, I guess we talked about players who are missing, Malik, Hafiz, who Guyana Amazon Warriors have really lost. One big player, Nicholas Pooran. So obviously he was captain for the past few seasons, a real key figure in that middle order. Obviously, we saw him hit a brilliant century for them in 2020 and just sort of, he shepherded the innings for the Guyana Amazon Warriors. So one player that the Amazon Warriors have missed this season has been Nicholas Pooran, their former captain of the past few years. Now, he was a key component in their middle order batting, and unfortunately for Amazon Warriors, he's gone back to his home franchise, the Trinbago Knight Riders, this season. And Shimron Hetmeyer, who captained the under-19 West Indies side to World Cup victory in 2016, has taken over at the helm. Now, from my observations, Mash, one big difference between the two captains I've noticed is Shimron Hetmeyer seems to be very more relaxed. He's a more relaxed, easygoing sort of captain. He hasn't got that intensity which Pooran has. You see him laughing and joking with the players a lot. His body language is very relaxed, whereas Pooran was very vocal, intense, always making changes over after over. Have you sort of noticed the difference between the leadership styles of Hetmeyer and Pooran so far?
It's a very good point, and I'm mindful of what I say about Shimron, because I think for a lot of Amazon Warriors fans, he's seen as like the great Guyanese hope. And arguably, some of those early defeats in CPL this year, you could say it was weak captaincy. We spoke about his decision to bowl Shepherd at the death in consecutive games. And at the end, but at the end of the day, Shimron's personality is Shimron's personality. And to try and suggest, not that we are, but anyone who would try to suggest that he doesn't have a tactical mind, I think would be wrong. But and again, we don't know. We're not there. We're not on the field. Are there still maturity issues for Shimron? Quite possibly. But then at the same time, and by maturity issues, I mean like captaincy maturity issues, as in tactical maturity. I'm not talking about
Yeah.
maturity as in an individual. But then it's kind of a catch-22 situation, Santoki, because for me, Shimron becoming captain was long overdue. He should have got this opportunity. And I don't just mean in CPL, whether this be in Super 50, whether this be in first class cricket, or now it's CPL, he's not going to truly find his true self as a player without getting leadership responsibilities. So I think it's the positives outweigh the negatives in terms of the long-term development for both the franchise and for Shimron. But here's what I would say though. Is Shimron 100% ready to be a captain? Probably not. And let's use the example of Nicholas with West Indies. Nicholas has suffered a bit for not having any genuine experienced players around him to help guide him as a young captain for the West Indies, right? And there's just been times with Shimron in this additional CPL where I'm like, you mentioned it earlier on, he would probably kill for a Shoaib Malik to just help him a bit, or a Hafiz to just guide him a bit. And you kind of just look around the Guyana team and go, and I'm not counting like an Imran Tahir. You know what I mean when I say that. I mean like a leader. You're just looking around, guys. So who's Shimron turn to then? Who's the old head he turns to when he needs that bit of guidance to maybe slow the game down and think about this, that, and the other? And I just wonder if in the haste to anoint Shimron, the think tank forgot about he'd need some experienced heads around him.
Mash, that's an excellent point you make. And obviously this season, the Guyana Amazon Warriors, with the finals being hosted in Guyana at Providence Stadium for the first time in history, there's a lot of pressure on Hetmeyer and the coaching staff as well. Rayon Griffin is leading them as head coach. I think if they do manage to fall short of the playoffs and final, there will be massive backlash from fans, bearing in mind that these are Guyanese locals, so the cuss-out will be strong. So I think added to sort of the inconsistencies with team selection at the moment, they've got that added pressure of being expected to finally win a title, this time on home soil at Providence Stadium in Guyana at the end of September. So it'd be interesting to see how they fare. As we said at the top of the show, this isn't a cuss-out of the franchise. It's more just a deep dive analysis as to where they are at the halfway stage of the CPL. And we'll probably look at some more franchises as the tournament goes in and just look at how squads are constructing their sides, and also maybe look at how it's affecting the West Indies side going forward, if there's any more breakout stars or anyone who we feel can fit into the West Indies setup. So yeah, there'll be a lot of talking points as the CPL goes on into its third week.
Yeah, most definitely, Santoki. And I think, like I say, particularly for Amazon Warriors fans listening to this, it is worth reminding people at the time of recording that the Warriors have only played 4 games. And I think I was saying similar, like technically, if you look at the table right now, TKR are bottom and Warriors are second bottom. Would you genuinely bet against that being the way the tournament ends? Very unlikely. And I've just always had the opinion that once you get to Guyana, I wouldn't want to play either Guyana or Trinidad if it came down to it in the final 4. So like Santoki says, people, this is just looking at the story so far, identifying some of the errors, strengths, weaknesses with the Amazon Warriors side at the halfway point of the tournament, but plenty to play for. And as I say, if the Warriors can make use of home advantage and find their way into the final 4, don't be surprised if they were to get to a final and then choke once again.
Listen, Masho, you're trying to get us banned in Guyana. Listen, you've already slandered Trinidad with the Lara talk. Now it's Guyana's turn.
But Santoki, all jokes aside, that's the Amazon Warriors. But that's goodbye from me. Is it goodbye from you?
Yeah, and obviously, if you've got any opinions about the Amazon Warriors, if you agree or disagree with what we said, get in contact with us, Caribbean Cricket Podcast, or comment on this video or platform, wherever you're listening or watching it, and we're happy to engage and discuss it. And as we said, look forward to us doing some more squad analysis during the rest of CPL. But that's it from us here on 99.94, and we'll see you on the other side.
Stay locked, people. Bye.